Hello, everybody. Welcome to a bonus edition of Got Your Back, brought to you by our title sponsor, DLR Vinyl Products. Quality maintenance-free decking and fencing. Do it once, do it right with DLR Vinyl. So, bit of a different format tonight. No Jason Strudwick. Dregs and Duffy have been given the night off, which is great for us because that means we get to bring in the newest member of the TSN Insider team, Chris Johnston out of Toronto. Chris, how are you, pal?
I'm doing great, Ryan. Thanks for having me, bud.
Yeah, of course. I'm super pumped to do this. I was thinking about this before we started. Is this the first time that you and I have been on air together?
It definitely is.
Yeah.
I mean, we've known each other for about 102 years, roughly. Don't fact check that, but it's been a long time. But, you know, for so often we worked at companies that wouldn't put us on air or on camera or on mic together. So this is a first.
Yeah, I'm excited about this, man. We've been on the road together for a long time, Stanley Cup Finals and playoff series and Board of Governors and GM meetings and all that. And
Moscow 2007.
Yeah, Moscow.
Can you forget?
Sergio Oliveira is our camera guy. He was epic on that trip too. But so we've been through we've had some times, you and I, CJ. We've had some times. So I think it's really cool that we get a chance to be on air together. And selfishly, I was super pumped when we brought you in to be part of our team. And I'm glad you're here on the podcast. Lots going on right now. Hey, just so much as we approach a trade deadline here. So this is what I want to do tonight. We'll recap a little bit of what's already happened. But I think I'm going to go around the horn with the Canadian team. So we'll get there in a couple of minutes. But let's start with what has already gone down. So we will get to the breakdown brought to you by Park Mazda, where the newly redesigned 2022 CX-5 has arrived. See all the available colors and trims in stock at parkmazda.ca. So we had some action here. It is Saturday night, the Claude Giroux deal, highly speculated that it would be the Florida Panthers, and it turns out it is. What were your thoughts on the deal and the return?
Tough deal for the Philadelphia Flyers to make, not only because they're trading a longtime captain, but, you know, Claude Giroux held a no movement clause, and it was pretty clear from his side of things, he wanted to be a Florida Panther, and that creates some problems when you get to the deadline. I mean, ideally, if you're selling a player off, and I think we can probably touch on this with the other move that was made, you want multiple teams bidding because that drives up the price. And I think so Chuck Fletcher was in a tough spot there. The Panthers had already given up their 2023 first round pick in the deal they made for Ben Sherratt this week. They'd already lost their 2022 first round pick. And so he gets a 2024 first round pick, which means that player won't probably be ready to play in the NHL for some period of time now. But, you know, I think all things considered, we have to remember Taylor Hall was in a similar spot last year with Buffalo, where he had control over it. The Sabres only got a second round pick in the deal they made with Boston. And I think all things considered, it's a decent deal for Philadelphia, and it's a great deal for Claude Giroux because he gets to choose where he plays next. I think there's at least a possibility we see him remain in Florida beyond this season, even though he's got an expiring contract, and he ends up where he wants to go now with, you know, at this stage of his career to chase a Stanley Cup.
Owen Tippett, 2024 first round pick, as you point out, they're really kicking that can down the road. I mean, it'll be a while before that pick is helping out the Philadelphia Flyers, and a third in 2023. Hampus Lindholm goes. I don't know, buddy. Is it just me, or are prices really steep right now? You know, you look at from Sherratt on, it feels like it's been some heavy buying.
Yeah, Sherratt's at a high bar, and I don't think that will continue right through Monday, but certainly for the other big names, the other, you know, really attractive pieces like Hampus Lindholm was, that sort of established a bit of a marketplace. And Boston tried to get Ben Sherratt. You know, one of the reasons they weren't able to complete the deal with the Montreal Canadiens is they wanted permission to speak to Sherratt to negotiate an extension. They didn't want to acquire him just as a rental. And I think Montreal was like, hey, Florida's offering basically the same package and they don't want that. So let's just move on, go to Florida. And so I think that's interesting when it comes to Lindholm, because as we're recording this, there's no deal worked out, but I do think there's the framework of a contract for Hampus Lindholm already in place with Boston. And so that explains part of the price they paid here, because there's a first round pick, 2 second round picks, John Moore, which is, you know, a contract really going back the other way to make the money work here. And Urho Vakanainen, pardon my rough, you know, way I'm using that man's name, but you know, really it's so Vakanainen's a young player, a first and 2 seconds. It's a big price, but you know, Boston isn't getting Lindholm as a rental. At some point, I think in the next 24 to 48 hours, we'll be talking about a long-term extension done with the Bruins and Lindholm. And So it's a big price. And look, at a lot of this action is centered in the Atlantic Division, right? It's Florida getting Sherratt and Giroux. Now you've got Boston, paying a big price for Lindholm. Tampa on Friday went out and got Brandon Hagel for 2 first-round picks. So this is a division that you have the team loading up, and I think that's a dynamic that's at play here. And there's some pressure on the Toronto Maple Leafs as a result, because they're the one team in that group that hasn't made a big move as we're recording this.
Well, and then you think about the Colorado Avalanche too, who got ahead of the game, last week in making a couple of additions that I think made them a tougher team to play against. But word was they were wanting in on Claude Giroux. And so are they still going to be big game hunting, do you think, after missing out on this?
Yeah, I would be surprised if they didn't come away by Monday's deadline with another sort of top 6, maybe top 9 forward, but preferably top 6 forward. Claude Giroux was sort of their eye of the prize there, but they didn't really get a true chance at him again, because Giroux controlled the circumstances. I mean, he negotiated that no move clause. He earned it. He gets to choose where he goes next. And while Colorado was in the mix until the end, he didn't want to play there, at least over Florida. And so, yes, I do think Joe Sakic's left himself with ample cap room and has a lot of motivation to be active before Monday. And so, the Avalanche will be licking their wounds and repositioning their targets on plan B, C, and D.
By the way, how perfect was it that they celebrated 1,000 games for Claude Giroux in what essentially was his last game? I mean, that is just the perfect way to go out if you're going to go out.
Unreal. I mean, such a cool ceremony. He's got his family on the ice, and we had like 20 or 30 friends and family down for it. And the way it worked out, Philly played the next night in Ottawa, so that the team flew out after the game. He basically said goodbye to the team there. He didn't go to Ottawa with them, even though he wasn't traded until Saturday. So yeah, you have that emotional ceremony, you have that moment with the Flyers and your family, and then the team leaves, and basically you're waiting for this trade. I mean, I can't think of sort of a more perfect bookended situation than we just saw in the last few days.
Absolutely. By the way, did you notice my light just went out?
Yeah, I tried to push through that.
You
I didn't
did.
know if that was normal. It's our first hit together. I don't know if that's normal for you or what.
Yeah, it's normal for hits with me to be a complete mayhem. But this is what you need to know about Got Your Back podcast. This is the podcast that doesn't edit. We don't have the budget for it. So no matter what happens on this podcast, Chris, we push through it. And did you notice I actually clicked into my camera and changed the shutter speed and adjusted the settings myself?
True pro.
Yeah, true pro. Okay, I want to get to the Canadian NHL teams. And again, high budget operation we have going here. We're going to start with the Edmonton Oilers, but what we have the ability to do on this is we can change colors to, okay, there we go. We go blue for the Oilers for right now. Also have another special treat for you. If you haven't heard this yet, we've been listening to it for like 15 years working with Darren Dreger, but our special sound effects board brought to you by Average Joe's.
Oh, this is big.
You've heard that, haven't you? That phone
I've heard that, yeah.
It's constant. Every time his phone goes off, he has to chirp that. So now that our effects are behind us, let's start with the Edmonton Oilers, since I'm based here in Edmonton. I think Carson Soucy is the perfect fit for what this team needs. They need to upgrade the player that's in their lineup every night on the blue line. He's a left shot, plays the right side, can play left. He insulates him in a number of different ways. The question is, what's the price going to be, and is it realistic?
Well, and that's always the question when you're dealing with the Seattle Kraken. Ron Francis is known for driving a bit of a tough bargain. I know that Calgary had some challenges in completing the Cal Yarncroc deal before they got it done in terms of a price tag. Carson Soucy, it's hard to say, right? Because we're at the stage where we've seen the players go for big prices, but that can't stay forever because there's only so many bidders remaining on what remains. Carson Soucy, is he a 3rd round pick? Is he a 2nd round pick? I can't see it getting to a 1st round pick. I certainly don't think Edmonton would pay that price if that's where the bidding got to. You're right to focus in on him, though. He's certainly one of the players sort of in the Oilers' crosshairs. My sense of what Edmonton's been up to, though, is that they got like 10 guys they're at least keeping tabs on. I mean, there's this sort of very established left shot D market. We've seen some of the sort of more bigger names or the more prized possessions go, but there's a lot of other players there. And I think Edmonton's been sniffing around. I even heard today, Ryan, that they've at least asked about Zdeno Chara, which isn't to suggest that they're going to go trade for him, but, I think they want to know if he'd be willing to move. And, I think that's a lot of what's put that under due diligence on the marketplace. But, I would be surprised if the Oilers didn't come away with some kind of, move here by Monday in that department. And Susie fits a lot of, buckets here. It's just really what Ron Francis does. He wasn't a GM that made a lot of deals when he was in Carolina. We saw him made the Yarncroc trade, but, I think a lot of people are wondering what he does because he has other players to sell too, to other teams. But, how busy is he? Does he just want to sell them for whatever price he can get, or is he going to hold firm to his asks? And that's kind of where we're at on a Saturday night leading into that Monday deadline, is whether, the price drops a little bit, and that would make more sense for the Oilers.
Well, the thing to remember on Susie as well, like he's not Sherrod, right? They're not necessarily at the same level, but he's got another year left on his deal. So you're not trading for a rental. And that also means that Francis is under no pressure to move him. If he doesn't get what he wants for him, he can hang on to him because he's got him under contract for next year. So sort of changes things. My sense is they'll probably stand pat on the goaltending. I think they're looking. I think they're open to it, but I don't know that a solution that is clearly better for them is going to present itself in a deal that they find acceptable. I think they're going to be okay standing pat, and that might boggle some people's minds, but I just think that's where they're at.
Well, and I would say to those people, though, who do you want them to get? Because if we just take Marc-Andre Fleury's name right out of the mix, just because I don't think it applies here, like who that's on the market would anyone trade for? Vegas could probably use a goaltender with some of what's going on with Robin Leonard. Toronto's had some issues with its goaltending. I think all those teams have looked at the market and they're like, "Are we getting Eunice Corpusalo?"
Yeah. What about Forsberg? Reimer or Forsberg?
Maybe, but here's the thing. I don't get the sense Ottawa's tendered an offer at least to Forsberg. I know they haven't got a deal done there, but I think that their focus is more on extending him rather than trading him. I suppose that could change in this small window we have now before the deadline, but there aren't a lot of obvious candidates, I think is the truth. And so I understand where Edmonton would get to that point. I mean, it almost makes sense to me. Then you try to fortify your defense if you can't feel like there's an upgrade in goal for you. And, the other thing I should mention on Susie is I wonder if the Oilers just try to get the deal done with one or more of their prospects rather than just make it a picks deal. And so, I think that's kind of where we're at this point, going back and forth on those types of things. And I wouldn't rule out a forward for Edmonton. It's not obviously the number one priority, but, Nick Paul seems to be someone that's on their radar. They're not alone. It's 6 or 7 teams, I was told, as of Saturday afternoon. I've been checking in on Nick Paul or interested in him, but I could see him being a fit for Edmonton perhaps too. So the Oilers are they got their fishing poles in a lot of different lakes here. We'll just see if there's any bites or if it just ends up being one smaller move.
And I guess keeping in mind that their trade deadline was when they grabbed Evander Kane. I mean, that's where the cap space went. He's been an excellent addition, scored a couple of goals on Saturday night, and has been really, really good for them. Okay, moving on. Dregs. And there we go. Red for the Calgary.
Oh, this is big.
Yes, it is, Dregs. Yes, it is. Moving on to the Calgary Flames. Brad Treliving got ahead of it with Callie Yarncroc. Playing on a line with Mangiapane and Toffoli. A good ad for them. But where else do you see them going?
They're so hard to get a read on. Like the official word coming out of there is we're done because they got Toffoli done, really early and obviously added Yarncroc. But, I still think that they're at least kicking around the left shot D market, like a lot of teams. And, they've gotten good seasons this year out of Oliver Shillington and Nikita Zadorov. But I think if they could get maybe one player to play ahead one of those guys, they would. I actually believe they at least kick tires on Lindholm. I don't think they're necessarily close to getting him, but this is such a special, unique season in Calgary. Johnny Gaudreau's a free agent at the end of the year. Matthew Tkachuk needs a new deal. It feels like they might have trouble keeping the whole band together beyond this season, and they're having such a great year. I mean, they barely lost in calendar year 2022. And so I wouldn't be surprised if they did something surprising, which is probably doesn't satisfy kind of what you're looking for. You want names, you want what the exact return is going to be. I get the feeling that what happens next is sort of gravy for them, that they feel comfortable with their team if they don't make another move. But, they're definitely kicking around the D market to see if they can maybe find a little bit of an upgrade because, they might never have a better chance certainly with this core of players to make a run at the Stanley Cup.
For sure. This has absolutely nothing to do with trade deadline, but it was one of the best clips of the year. Daryl Sutter on Eric Goodbranson getting busted open and how long it took for that to get fixed.
Do your knitting, right? I could have done in 5 minutes. So horses, cows up 10 minutes. So took 33 minutes to get stitches. Need 6 defensemen for 65 minutes or maybe all night. So hopefully our whole organization's learning from that.
The whole organization needs to learn from that one. How well that gold from Sutter. That was 2 great clips from him this week.
Yeah, the other one about, wasting 8 days if you got to play Carolina in the first round. I mean, I love listening to Daryl Sutter. It's old school. It's different. It's unique. I'm not sure if I want to stand in for questions with them every day. I mean, I give it to our colleagues in Calgary. I tip my hat to them for doing that. But man, those clips are gold.
Get your knitting done.
Do your knitting, right?
Get your knitting, right? And it's like, if you're Eric and Branson, you're like, okay, I get it. He wanted me back, and that's the ultimate compliment. But it is my face, right? It's not the backside of an animal. Take your time and maybe try and make it so that I'm not too Frankenstein. All right, Daryl Sutter and the Flames having a heck of a good year. I'm going green for the Vancouver Canucks.
Oh, this is big.
Yes, Dregs, it is. Jimmy Rutherford, Patrick Alvine. I like the management group they have going. And this is their first crack at this, kind of together as a group. You've got the veteran in Jimmy Rutherford, and you got the newbies. You got all sorts of new, fresh voices in there. And a lot of people are wondering, what's it going to look like in Vancouver? Do you have a sense collectively of what this group has come up with?
I want to call them my wild card team of the Canadian teams, and not just because they're chasing down or trying to chase down a wild card spot in the Western Conference. They've replaced management this year. They've replaced most of the coaching staff. The next shoe to drop is the players, right? And, I think that they're definitely going to make some sort of smaller moves. A guy like Tyler Mott is drawing interest, a 4th liner for them. I think will likely be moved on from. They'll look to move Travis Hamonic, but I don't think they've ruled out entirely still, one of those forwards that's kind of been in rumors for a while. I don't think it's going to be JT Miller at this point. They sort of explored the marketplace on him. I don't think they like the offers. He's still under contract for another year, so they feel that they can push it back and delay that decision. Maybe they'll even be re-signing him this summer. We'll see. He's had a great year. But, Connor Garland, I know has received renewed interest here in the last day or so.
Yeah.
The LA Kings have kicked around him. I think a few other teams have called, so I could see that happening. Brock Besser's still due a big qualifying offer at the end of the season. I don't get the feeling that they have to move him, but they're open to it. And just look at Jim Rutherford's, past. I mean, he's been among the most active general managers consistently, or certainly in the top handful of general managers during his time in the league. I would be surprised, as much as I think they're trying to downplay the rumors, because it definitely had an impact on their dressing room. And the team, give it credit, has won a little bit more than it's lost the last little stretch and sort of stayed in that playoff race. But, I think come Monday, we're going to see the Canucks make a couple moves, and I don't think it'll just be 4th liners. I think they'll make one decent move in terms of upfront to give themselves more cap space moving forward. And they're not going to do a full rebuild. They still want this team to be competitive in a window where Quinn Hughes and Elias Pettersson are part of it. But, I do think there's going to be a short-term refresh, and it probably starts on Monday.
Shen on the way out as well, most likely.
That's a tougher one to call. Like, they really like him.
Yeah.
And he doesn't make much, right? He's less than 900,000 on the cap. He's actually been playing with Quinn Hughes, just the way their pairings have worked. And he's under contract for 1 more year. They like the leadership. They like the player. But I still think if the price is right, he'll be moved just because he's an asset. And look, there's the reason they like him is the reason other teams trying to win a Stanley Cup this year like him. And so, yeah, I'd say it's sort of 60-40. He's moved, but it's not a slam dunk. They're certainly not just selling him for any price. It's going to take a strong offer to get him. But, I think pretty much anything in Vancouver not named Pettersson or Hughes is available for the right price.
All right, good stuff. All right, moving on to
Oh, this is big.
the Winnipeg Jets, and it's Cop Watch. Which way are they going to go with this? Good player. Like, this is a valuable player that makes you harder to play against. Which way do you think this goes?
Good player, and a player on an expiring contract that wasn't going to re-sign in Winnipeg at least before the deadline. So it's been tricky because Winnipeg's another team. They've sort of hung around the playoff race maybe more than we might have expected, management might have expected. If we recorded this 3 or 4 days ago, I would have said they probably weren't going to trade him. They treat him as an own rental. I think that the Jets, though, have seen some of the prices being paid for the players already moved. Even a guy like Yarncroc, right? He was a 2nd and a 3rd, straight up. There's also 7th thrown in there because there's some salary retained, but that's a pretty strong return. And so I think that maybe not committed to which way they're going with Kopp, but the idea of having to listen has gotten a little bit more acute, given that this seems to be a good market to sell a player in. And so that would be a tough player for the Jets to say goodbye to at this stage, when they are right there, kind of in the mix to try to make the playoffs. But I think management's realistic too about where they're at. And so, not a slam dunkies move, but it does seem like it's moving more in that direction. And let's see what a team like Colorado does, right? I mean, they didn't, connect on the Giroux attempt. Maybe someone like Andrew Kopp makes sense for them. I do think there are other teams that are sniffing around as well. And so, I do think that he's a player we'll probably be talking about moving on Monday, but that's a bit of an agonizing decision, because he just does all the things a coach loves, a GM loves, and he's a valuable part of a team trying to scratch and claw its way in.
Yeah, disappointing, I would say, for the Winnipeg Jets. They had designs on bigger things this year.
Yeah, it wasn't meant to be this way. I mean, certainly they didn't think they would be in a position on come deadline where they're deciding, are we buyers or sellers? I mean, they've been buyers the last number of years. If you look at some of the trades they've made, they had an active summer, but it hasn't worked out. Paul Maurice steps down midseason. It's been one of those seasons that, I think they're probably a team to watch come this off season, like how they react to that. Do they stand pat and decide, okay, a lot of things worked against us, or do they make bigger decisions? They haven't come to that conclusion just yet, but I do think that they're going to be one of the real sort of interesting teams to watch, no matter how these last 20 or so games play out.
Okay.
This is big.
Probably would have benefited me to go sooner with the Toronto Maple Leafs, but I'm just this Western Canadian podcast, so I buried the Leafs. I buried the Leafs. We're kind of moving west to east anyways. So Kyle Dubas, no third, fourth, fifth, or sixth this year. Dregs had an interesting tweet Saturday about the deal that almost happened. It feels like they've been pretty active. So coming up short so far on the defenseman, do you think that they get that done?
They have to. They've set this as such an internal bar. They've sort of set the fan base up for it. And I know you say, like, does that really matter? I think it matters. I think part of deadline is what you do to actually help your team from a nuts and bolts, X's and O's standpoint. Part of it is PR. Part of it is the message you send to your fans, to the media, to your own players with a move. And so I would be stunned if they don't get a defenseman in some way, shape, or form by Monday. They were in pretty hard on Brandon Hagel, and that's sort of at the core of Dregs' tweet that Chicago actually offered them Hagel and Marc-Andre Fleury for a couple first-round picks, a draft pick by the name of Matthew Knees, who they made last year in the draft. He actually played for Team USA in Beijing at the Olympics. He's someone that the Leafs actually hope to debut at some point later this season, that they want to see him in the NHL themselves. And Peter Mrazek as well, who's under contract for a couple more years. So it could have been an interesting deal. It was a deal that wasn't. I think Toronto wants to, maybe play things out a little bit more rather than give up first round picks in that kind of trade. But, I do think the Leafs will be active. Mark Giordano makes the most sense to me among the players still on the market. The Leafs would have loved to get Hampus Lindholm. Make no mistake there. That was the guy that they would have had circled at the top of their board. But, the price that Boston paid was one Toronto didn't feel it could pay, because, they made a lot of draft pick trades last trade deadline. They gave up a first for Nick Foligno. That didn't work out. I think they traded 6 picks at that deadline. So they're a little bit hamstrung in terms of what they can do. And so they're kind of making secondary or tertiary moves. And I think Giordano's, the next most obvious one. And based on the intel I have, Ryan, he would really like to play in Toronto, which matters as a local boy, because there certainly are some players in the league that don't want to play in Toronto for their own reasons. So, I think that's an obvious move. I think they'll try to get a fourth line forward as well in a cheaper deal. I don't think they're going to address the goaltending, much like Edmonton. I think they've looked at the market and just decided there's not a clear upgrade there, so why waste assets?
Could you imagine if it had been Hagel and Fleury coming to Toronto? Like, can you imagine what that would have been like? I mean, the town would have gone nuts.
It would have been tremendous. I mean, I like the spectacle, right? I mean, I don't know if it would have been a good deal. I mean, there's a reason they passed on it.
Yeah.
I wonder about Tampa's deal, honestly. Like, I give Julian Brisebois credit. Obviously, he's been all in. It worked out great with Goodrow and Coleman, even David Savard at last year's deadline. But at some point, it feels, look, it's all he had to do. He didn't have any cap space, so he had to sort of take another big swing. But that felt a little too cute by half for me. And ultimately, the Leafs decided that wasn't what they needed. I mean, Toronto's forwards are pretty good. I think it's keeping the puck out of the net, whether it's the guy standing between the pipes or the way they play defensively that they're trying to address. And again, they're in a very difficult division. Everyone around them is loading up, and they're kind of stuck in neutral right now.
And it's all about the playoffs for this group, right? I mean, basically the regular season, expectation wise, it doesn't mean a thing. The judgment on this team starts in the first round of the postseason.
And by the way, you're probably getting Tampa in round 1. So good luck with that.
Yay. Easy sledding there.
What could go wrong?
Exactly.
Oh, this is big.
Okay, moving to the Ottawa Senators. We touched on Ottawa a lot there, so we don't have to spend much time on them. Nick Paul, you talked about Forsberg. What about the likes of Tierney and Ennis? And I mean, are they basically going to try and offload the assets that they're not going to have?
Yeah, they're in pure sell mode. Like they're in trade guys for whatever we can get for them. Zach Sanford's a player I've heard they've received some interest on. Part of St. Louis's Cup winning team a couple years ago. I think Nick Paul's probably their most appealing piece right now if they're not going to move Forsberg. And it does sound like Nick Paul is willing to negotiate a contract extension with the team that acquires him. So that's a positive potentially. It's not necessarily a rental team if you're giving up some assets for him.
How did teams feel about him at $3 million, CJ? Does that feel a little rich for teams, or do you think there would be teams willing to go there with him?
It depends what Ottawa is taking back. I think teams contemplating acquiring him and paying him $3 million or in that range, which is basically what he is looking for, are trying to send at least a little bit of salary back the other way or a player back to Ottawa. And I think that's kind of where the hangup is, right? I mean, the Senators are not looking to take on any salary as part of these moves. And I think that's kind of where the game of chicken's happening right now with Nick Paul. I mean, he's certainly going to get them a draft pick at minimum, though. I think that's safe to say. As I say, Sanford could go. I'm not sure about Tierney. He makes a fair bit on the cap, and he hasn't had a very good year. He's been kind of buried there. But they have Michael Del Zotto too, who's having a great year in the American Hockey League.
There's that free Del Zotto hashtag on Twitter. Hey, it's been going on here.
He's tearing it up in Belleville. I don't know what to make of that. He's under contract next year. It's kind of a tough situation for a guy, but I think they'd like to move him if they could. So Pierre Dorion is trying to be active. I don't know how much he's going to be able to get done. He certainly doesn't control the most attractive pieces on the chessboard, but he's got guys to move, and I think he's got a lot of incentive to move them.
Do you think Montreal Canadiens fans want blue, red, or white for theirs?
Let's go red.
Oh,
go
this
red
is
for
big.
We're already on red. Well, we can make it. We can make it a flashing red actually if we want. Just oh, there's purple in there though. That's no good. That's not going to work. We got to get rid of that mess. I'm just going to go back to red here. We'll just stick. Oh, it's broken.
Who knew that you had all these?
Oh, buddy, you kidding me?
Stops, but
nothing but budget on this show. Nothing but budget. So the big deal, Sherratt, has already been done. They got 13 picks in the draft. A couple of firsts, 3 thirds. Kulak, Weidman, Perreault, some UFAs as well. What do you think we see from Montreal here on out?
I think they're still going to make more moves. You're right. Like they've done enough in their eyes. Like they're sort of like Calgary of the sellers. Like if they don't make another trade, I think they're going to be comfortable because they've gotten some good assets back. But they have Arturi Lehkonen, who's generating a ton of interest. Internally, they had said we're only going to move when we get a first. I'm not sure if they hold to that. Maybe if it ends up being a second, they move him. But my understanding is there's a lot of interest on him. They also have Brett Kulak, who's certainly not going for a first. But I know a number of teams have made calls on him and have interest in him. I think even Calgary, who's had him in the past, have at least made a call there to see if there's a fit. Maybe I think he's one of the 17 left shot defensemen Edmonton is at least trying to keep a gauge on. So I think they make another couple moves. Again, new management, right? They're not attached to these guys.
Yeah.
Their job is to try to ship things out. They're also trying to trade Shea Weber's contract too, which I know has been discussed a little bit. I know there was
that'd be a heavy lift, eh?
With Arizona, there's been a deal discussed. I'm not sure if they'll get that done now. It might be done in the offseason because there's a few more years left on that contract. But Montreal's anything that isn't nailed down is at least potentially being shipped out there. And I think with a new management group that you're going to see them still be pretty busy. And so they're interesting because they don't want to do the full rebuild either. Like they're going to try to ship this stuff out and have a little bit more cap space and then be players from July on free agency.
Change gears on the fly, eh? A little bit.
Yeah, they're not looking to be bad for 6 years. They're going to try to bring in players too at some point, but they've got a few more guys they're going to try to ship out in the meantime. And so I keep an eye particularly on Lehkonen and Kulak as we get towards Monday.
CJ, you are a machine, buddy. I have wrung you dry of every morsel you have, I feel like, today, but that was a great rundown. Thanks, pal.
It was awesome. Thanks, Ryan.
Okay, that was a breakdown brought to you by Park Mazda, your dealer for life in Sherwood Park off Y Road. Visit parkmazda.ca. You can stick around for Who's Got Your Back. You want to tell us a story or listen to a story, buddy? You got some time?
Absolutely. I'm in.
All right, good stuff. Coming up after the break, Who's Got Your Back? Brought to you by DeBoers. We'll ask CJ. I'll tell you how my reputation was salvaged last second today by an 18-year-old kid, and we'll go to the email as well. You're listening to Got Your Back, brought to you by DLR Vinyl Products. Hey, Strutty, question for you. Have you ever tried putting in your own fence?
I sure have. Between digging the posts, mixing up cement and digging the holes, it's absolute killer.
It's brutal on the back. Well, listen, what if I told you you could put in a fence without having to dig a hole or mix any concrete?
I'd be much more likely to come over and help you out.
Yeah, well, you're not the first guy I would call, but thank you for that. Listen, my brother's company, DLR Vinyl Products, they've come up with a system where you can actually put high-quality vinyl fence in the ground without having to dig a hole, without having to mix any concrete. They can teach do-it-yourselfers how to do it, and they can also work with contractors who might be looking to start installing vinyl. It's super high-quality product. The great thing about it is that it has fantastic longevity. You put it in, you don't have to worry about staining or sanding or anything like that. I've been lucky enough, Struddy. They've put in multiple fences in my different yards, and they've built me 3 decks. I have totally abused the fact that my family is in the fencing and decking business, but it's great product. Give Rob a call in Calgary or Rick a call here in Edmonton. This is a company my dad started. It's a family business. I'm super proud of it, and I'm very proud that they are our title sponsors. That's DLR Vinyl Products in Edmonton and Calgary. Hey, it's Ryan Rashog. While many are feeling the sting of inventory shortages, Park Mazda has you covered. They've got new Mazdas arriving every month, including the redesigned 22CX-5 in whatever color you're looking for. They've also got a huge selection of used vehicles with new arrivals every week and some of the most competitive interest rates on cars, trucks, SUVs, and more. Park Mazda, your dealer for life in Sherwood Park off Y Road. Schedule a test drive at parkmazda.ca. Folks, golf season is just around the corner, and I don't know about you, but I am some kind of fired up over it. It's the perfect time to get yourself fitted for new clubs or some great new apparel. Well, DeBoers has you covered for all of it. Their facility is first class with amazing TrackMan technology in their simulators and top-of-the-field fitting specialists. You can order now for spring delivery, and they've also got a bunch of new 22 apparel for you to go check out. It's a fantastic group down there at DeBoers. The shop has a great positive feel. I highly recommend you check them out on the corner of 53rd Street and 99th Avenue. DeBoers, helping you play better golf since 1999. Okay, time now for Who's Got Your Back, brought to you by DeBoers. Time to get in and get fitted for those new irons or to check out their 2022 apparel, helping you play better golf. DeBoers. CJ, we've had some pretty cool stories. I don't know if you heard the first episode. Brett Kissel came on and told us a story about how Garth Brooks gussied up their dressing room one night because they had brand new babies on the road. That was it was a pretty awesome story from Brett Kissel. Got a story tonight from somebody who emailed into us as well. So one of the things we're going to do on the pod is we're going to ask our guests if there was a moment in their life, big, small, big deal, no big deal, where somebody stepped in. So what do you got for us, pal?
You know what? I've been struggling with this one a little bit, in part because so many people have had my back for so long. And you would know this being in our industry. I mean, one of the cool things I think about our job is there is a real sort of communionship about it, even no matter where you work or what have you. And you know, we've all spent a lot of time on the road and things like that. But the one, for whatever reason, came into mind. This is just a random thought.
That's what we want.
There was a period, I think it was the 2016 playoffs, I want to say it was, and my mom had died earlier that year. And so I was kind of having a tough time with that. Like, not in a way maybe I was acknowledging, maybe even a way I was aware of. But there was a day actually I bumped into Jim Rutherford and in the bowels of an arena in Tampa. And we had a conversation, and for me, it felt normal. Then afterwards, he just sent me this really long text. And like, I have to be honest, like, it's not like Jim Rutherford and I are close. I mean, obviously we know each other professionally. And he just was like, it just felt like something was wrong there. If you ever need to talk, that kind of text. And that really meant something to me because first of all, he didn't have to do that. And I think that if we're looking at like, who's got your back, that's the definition of it. I mean, like my parents have had my back. My best friends have had my back. My partners have had my back. I mean, that's expected. But sometimes I think you're reminded in our industry that it's people that really didn't have to eat. I mean, if he never said anything, it would have been totally fine on him. And I just thought of that for some reason as I was running through my mind of like times where I felt like, wow, like that was really cool that, he just was wanting to make sure I was okay. And I guess could tell I was a bit distraught about whatever was going on in my life. And so, I think that I found anytime I've been going through a hard time, Ryan, that kind of thing happens. Like sometimes it's the people you don't expect, or certainly the people that it's not their responsibility. And so that's the one that jumps to my mind. I don't know why. It really meant a lot to me. I never actually said anything to Jim about that in the years since, but it's a reminder to me sometimes, because we all get in our own lives, right? We all get busy. We all are wrapped up in our own shit. And I think it's important sometimes if you see someone else who's struggling, just to even say something, because, it stuck with me, many years later.
That's a great story, buddy. You're so right. Like, we lost Dad the year I was supposed to go to the World Championships, and Todd McClellan was going to be coaching at the World Championship that year. I think it was I want to say maybe it was in Prague or something like that. Like my wife was coming with me. It was going to be a big trip, but we lost Dad really unexpectedly.
Right.
So then if you recall, Todd McClellan got hired by the Oilers shortly after that World Championship. And one of my first days back to work was the day he got hired. And I had a tough go when we lost Dad. Like it mucked me up for a while. And we were really close. And it took me a while to get back to work. And so I was like, okay, I'm doing this. I got myself dressed up into a suit, and I went and sat down at the press conference, and they introduced Todd McClellan. And one of the first things that he said once the question started, because I was going to ask the question, is he said, "Hey, Ryan, we missed you over at the Worlds. Just want you to know we're all very sorry for your family's loss. Wishing you all the best." And I was like, it was all I could do to get the question out because I was so choked up. Here I was just back at work, and he's at this press conference, and I think we were carrying it live. So, but I certainly will never forget that he did that. Just a really decent thing to do. And it was just really, really cool. So I feel you on the Jimmy Rutherford one, man. Lots of good people in hockey, hey, all over the place. You don't have to be close with one another. You really feel like the support is all around you.
For sure. I felt that the whole time, actually, when my mom even passed away. Like, I heard from some players, like guys I didn't really know. I heard from GMs. Like it actually blew me away just from people reaching out, through Twitter DMs or, text, what have you. Just actually, it almost made me feel bad at the time. That was, it's my first parent I'd lost. And I was thinking, how many people have I known that lost a parent and maybe I didn't properly, reach out? It's sort of what I was thinking. And I was amazed, like Victor Hedman reached out too. Wow. And, this was in 2016. I don't know how old Victor is, but he was probably 25 then. And I knew him a little bit to interview him, but it wasn't certainly, again, it's not like we're super tight or anything, but, I think you learn sometimes maybe when you're going through something hard, like how many people are there. And I'm with you. The hockey world rightly has gone through a lot of introspection, I think, the last little while. And obviously there's some horrible things that have happened. And not to look past any of those, but I do think that there is a real spirit and care in there. And so I think it's cool you're doing the podcast. I didn't even know why you called it Got Your Back. I mean, is there a story there, or what happened?
Well, I mean, no, like the title Got You Back comes from this segment. I mean, this is a kicker segment, we call it, right? Where you do something fun or different at the end of a podcast. But listen, man, I don't know what the last couple of years have been like for you. For
Shitty.
Me, yeah, exactly. I don't know. I've withdrawn. Like I buckled. I wanted nothing to do with Twitter. I wanted nothing to do with social media. It was so negative and so harsh. And as much as you want to be guys who just say, just don't go in your mentions, don't pay attention. It's really hard to do. And for whatever reason, I started getting super rattled and down about just all the negativity and the vitriol. And it's stupid because you know, it's maybe 4% of the people that follow you on Twitter that actually do that. The bulk of them are just great hockey fans and would never be rude. I just found myself withdrawing from the conversation, and it lasted like a year and a half. It was like lineup updates and breaking news, and Twitter can piss off. That was basically my attitude. And then I realized, yeah, you know, I've disengaged way too much. It's time for me to re-engage. And that's what this podcast was about. But if I'm re-engaging, I'm doing it on my terms, and I'm having the conversations that I want to have and that Struds wants to have. We're creating a place to tell some cool stories like you just told, whether it's about hockey or not or whatever. It's my podcast and I get to do what I want. And so we're just doing this. And if people don't get it, then you can turn off the podcast before this segment. This is a hockey podcast, but we're doing this too because I want to.
Well, hat tip to you. I love the idea. I love the initiative. And I think that a place of gratitude is a good place to live your life. And I think that's what that your kicker segment will do. It'll be a place for people to express gratitude for good things that have happened to them too.
Thanks, Paul. And I love your story. Okay, we're going to go to the Average Joe's inbox. Average Joe's on Baseline Road next to Home Depot. This is a hockey theme. This one comes to us from Dylan Cardinal. He reached out after the first podcast. He listened to it. He said, my Got Your Back shout out goes to one of my best friends, WHL referee Braden Arcand. Sorry if I'm not saying that right. The world's busiest man, getting pulled in 1,000 different directions, always takes time for me. He's pulled me out of some of the darkest times I've ever experienced, from wondering how to get my next meal to getting me where I am now. He landed me a job that I still have for 3 years, and I'm saving for my first home. Breezy, there's no way I'll ever be able to repay you. Thank you, brother. And that from Dylan Cardinal. Nice feel-good story, Dylan. And yeah, we want to hear from everybody. Like, we're going to read some emails, and we're going to, let listeners share their stories. GYBpod@gmail.com. That's GYBpod@gmail.com. This was fun, CJ. I'm glad we're on the same team, and I'm glad we got to do this.
Yeah, it was awesome, bud. And I'm sure we'll do it again.
Hey, good luck over the next couple of days. You're doing a fantastic job. Happy hunting. Look forward to seeing you on our set, and we'll keep in touch. Keep letting me know what's up with the oil, and I'll do likewise.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it.
Okay. Chris Johnston, folks. Thank you so much for dialing us in again. Podcast number 2, a bonus episode, is now in the books. I want to thank all of our sponsors, always so supportive: DLR Vinyl Products, Park Mazda, Belvin Construction, DeBoer's Golf Shop, and Average Joe's Sports Bar in Sherwood Park. This has been Got Your Back, presented by DLR Vinyl.